just heart-wrenching and terrible, terrible.
Our heartfelt condolences go out to the relatives and our prayers to the victims in the towers. Victims like Edna Cintron, who was in her office working in the North Tower on the morning of 9/11. This photo of Edna appeared in the official FEMA report analyzing the damage to the North Tower. She bravely climbed through the debris at the impact zone to wave to news helicopters and let them know that the fires had gone out and the survivors were awaiting rescue. Perhaps she believed that the worst was over and that firefighters would soon arrive. After all, steel frame buildings have never collapsed anywhere in the world before 9/11. Yet on this day, 3 steel frame structures would free fall at the speed of gravity, normally only possible with demolition explosives that take months of preparation. As the official reports state, the jet fuel would have burnt away within minutes, and we can see that indeed the fire looks like it is going out on its own. An accompanying diagram illustrates the interlocking steel grid that made up the outer framework of the towers.
I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because this structure is like the mosquito netting on your screen door, this intense grid, and the jet plane is just a pencil puncturing that screen netting. It really does nothing to the screen netting.
Fortunately, to silence any skeptics, Edna was photographed from several angles and even videotaped and aired on CBS television. However, Edna's story is one that the architects of 9/11 do not want told to the public because it causes people to disregard the unrealistic concept of the steel frame towers being weakened by office fires and collapsing like a house of cards. In reality, the towers were so strong that massive explosions were required to shatter the steel framework into pieces. If we look at the debris surrounding the World Trade Center, we find a snowfall of fine dust and intact pieces of paper scattered everywhere. If fires were responsible for the collapses, why didn't the papers burn or get shredded to pieces in the pancake collapse? Instead, we see white sheets of paper floating on a cushion of hot air in front of a pyroclastic flow of dust and debris through the streets. Paper and powder. How could it be possible? It appears that the high strength-to-weight ratio of paper allowed it to survive the energy blast that vaporized all heavy and denser materials. From within the shadows, we can see a bright explosive flash, and if we rewind the tape, a countless series of explosive flashes reveal themselves as responsible for the complete destruction of the inner steel framework. Simple visual evidence is perhaps the best place to start. This genuine building collapse due to an earthquake doesn't resemble the World Trade Center at all. Notice how the cars are crushed but otherwise intact. At the World Trade Center, cars parked nearby were turned into charred wrecks by an intense blast of heat, but were not crushed by falling debris. Could traditional demolition explosives produce this blast of intense heat? Clearly, a very powerful energy source was required. Our darkest suspicions have been confirmed by a military expert in Finland who has published several articles on this website showing international support for the victims in New York City. No other mechanism can explain the observed result of pulverized concrete and vaporized steel. On the right, we see a hydrogen bomb test and can instantly recognize the similarities to the World Trade Center. This is the awful truth that Fahrenheit 9/11 wasn't allowed to show you in a theater. Here we can see the firework explosions that the 1010 Winds news reporter spoke of within the collapsing debris. A rapid series of bright flashes are visible, indicating the destruction of the heavy steel in the internal framework.
It's like the interior of this building. There was pieces of their desks and pieces of the photos on their desks.
Could conventional demolition explosives vaporize all the people, computers, and office furniture in the towers, while pulverizing all the concrete in the floors into fine powder, and have enough left over to fracture the welded steel framework of up to 4-inch thick steel beams?
Trudging through this snow-like substance.
Our paper powder theory has been recognized as evidence of a thermonuclear device being detonated in the basements of both towers and World Trade 7 in order to superheat all the steel and concrete and sufficiently weaken the structure to facilitate the observed progressive collapses.
There was a schoolyard across the street, and I remember there were kids that were being evacuated from the schoolyard. And one of the girls looked up into the sky and she said to her father, "Daddy, look, they're doing it on purpose."
After a 3-year-long court battle, part of the firefighter and emergency worker eyewitness testimony was finally released to the public. Here are some excerpts that are confirmed by Rick's original video containing multiple explosions prior to the collapse of both towers.
Well, me and Mr. Hesh, the Corporation Counsel, were on the 23rd floor. I told him we got to get out of here. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. And I turned to Hesh. I said, "This is it. We're dead. We're not going to make it out of here." I took a fire extinguisher and I bust the window out. That's when this gentleman here heard my cries for help. This gentleman right here, and he said, kept saying, "Stand by. Somebody's coming to get you." They couldn't get to us for an hour because they couldn't find us.
To summarize this 9/11 eyewitness testimony, we were on the 23rd floor. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. They couldn't get to us for an hour because they couldn't find us. Let's analyze this 8th floor explosion testimony. This man said he was trapped for an hour before being rescued. We know that the South Tower fell in less than an hour after impact. Therefore, he must have been in the North Tower on the 23rd floor. So we can conclude that after the World Trade Center 1 impact, he walked down 15 floors. Jet fuel would burn off within 2 or 3 minutes after impact. If spilled fuel fell 1,000 feet down an elevator shaft in 10 seconds, it should have caused an explosion immediately, or it would quickly evaporate on the elevator shaft walls. Since it would take some time for the men to walk down 15 flights of stairs, we can conclude that the 8th floor explosion reported was not caused by jet fuel.
And then finally a jet comes up the river. You know, these fighter jets look cool, but I didn't feel thrilled anymore. Instead, I'm like, where were you? What the hell are you doing here so late? We needed you. They weren't there. Makes you feel not American anymore, you know?